Got the Metro newspaper today, which is now our top circulated newspaper. I was going to say it's top selling. It's a free newspaper, but it's now surpassed the Sun to be our most circulated newspaper. The cover wasn't anything to do with the general election. It was actually about a very ugly incident in football recently. I'll show you the cover. No copyright infringement intended. This is the Metro newspaper. That's today's Metro. And it's reporting on an incident at the Manchester Derby at the Etihad Stadium between Manchester City and Manchester United, in which a black Brazilian player was subject to racist abuse. This follows on from an ugly incident at in Bulgaria, in Sofia, not long ago. Um, Go read out a bit of an article from MSN News. Well, it's from the Independent actually. There's actually been an arrest over this. So basically, this yob, Anthony Burke, has been arrested. He was among those who was hurling abuse, and he actually made monkey chants, like gestures of monkey chanting. I mean, this is astonishing in 2019. I go read out a bit of the report, maybe not all of it. A man has been arrested. This is the Metro report, names him as Anthony Burke. Over allegations of racist abuse. I mean, they're using, they're being careful with the wording, but it's pretty obvious if you see the footage. It's not, it's straight cut. Over allegations of racist abuse directed at players in a derby match between Manchester City and Manchester United, police have said. Greater Manchester Police announced the arrest after video circulating on social media appeared to show a fan aiming monkey chants towards Manchester United players during the away side's shock 2-1 victory at the Etihad Stadium. So this report is obviously before the Metro report. I'm just not reading out the Metro report because it's longer. An FA spokeswoman had previously announced it would also be investigating the matter. It is understood United reported the incident to City and referee Anthony Taylor, with more than one of their players feeling that they had abuse of a racist nature aimed at them. There were also reports of missiles being thrown as tempers boiled over in the stands, with Fred appearing to be hit by an object hurled from the crowd as visitors prepared to take a corner. That's a reference to the player Fred's. Let me just get the name correct. Federico Rodriguez to Paulo Santos. He's better known as Fred, Brazilian player with Manchester United. And it clearly shows us when he goes to the corner, you can see Yobs blatantly pelting him with something. What exactly those objects are isn't very clear, but apparently lighters were found. Lighters. Now, I've heard in Scotland, in the Derby match in Glasgow, of players being pelted by coins. This really makes me angry because these jobs may think that that's harmless, but any object that is thrown with force can cause damage. I mean, if they're throwing that at the player's head, if it hits his eye, one can only imagine the consequences of that. It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. And I saw in one photograph there was a banana skin. The implications there are obvious. United boss Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, said Fred and Jesse Lingard were in the corner taking a corner, and I've seen the video heard from the boys. Manchester City said in a statement that they are aware of the video and are working with the police to identify any individuals who may be involved. They said the club operates a zero tolerance policy regarding discrimination of any kind, and anyone found guilty of racial abuse will be banned from the club for life. The issue of racism in English football has hit the headlines again virtually a year to the day since Manchester City's Raheem Sterling was subject to racially abusive language and threatening and aggressive behaviour at Stamford Bridge that led to a Chelsea supporter being banned permanently. In October, England's players faced monkey chants and Nazi salutes in a Euro 2020 qualifier away to Bulgaria, while earlier on Saturday, a visiting player allegedly experienced racist abuse by a supporter at the League Two match between Forest Green and Scunthorpe. Fred said the alleged incident at the Etihad showed we are still in a backward society. He told ESPN Brazil, unfortunately, this has happened in some stadiums. It happens here. It happened in Ukraine with some friends. It's sad, but we have to keep our heads up and forget about that. We can't give them any attention because that's all they want. I spoke to the referee after the match. They will do something about it, and that's all. Just a note from myself: Brazil itself is not immune from racism. Latin America has had more than its fair share of football-related thuggery. Um, we're all the same regardless of skin color, hair, and gender. We came from the same place and we all go to the same place when it's all said and done. Thank God I have a lot of friends here in the locker room who hug me like Lingard. I don't want to think about it, I just want to move on. Um, the footage from Bulgaria was definitely disturbing. I mean, the thugs there were black clad, they just looked like absolute, um, well, they looked like what they were, neo-Nazi thugs. Um, I'm pleased that this arrest has been made, and this guy apparently has been suspended from his job, a company called Care. His girlfriend has said that she's very shocked by this because apparently he has black family members. Um, but there's always excuses made around these sort of things. Just wait till you see Manchester City fans. Obviously, I'm not saying all of them, but there will be people out there who say, "Oh, it's just a bit of banter." Here's the thing: absolutely nobody, whether a player, an official, or another fan, should be subject to that sort of abuse in this day and age. I mean, I was just looking at a report from Sky News, and Andy Dunn of the Daily Mirror made a good point. He said that it's now gone beyond the point. He's the chief sports writer for the Daily Mirror. It's gone beyond the point of having slogans like, let's kick racism out and posters and so on. It's come to the point where clubs need showing that they are acting. Now, to be fair to Manchester City, they have made it clear that that players involved, excuse me, that fans involved in this. I don't even think fans, I think that kind of normalizes them. Let's call them thugs. Let's call them yobs. It's come to the point where they need to show that they're taking action. And if Manchester City is sincere about this, then, at least they're taking that seriously. The chair of Kick It Out, Sanjay Bandarji, if I can pronounce the guy's name right, excuse me, Sanjay Bandari. He's the chair of the anti-racist campaign group Kick It Out. He says that the situation has improved overall from 30 or 40 years ago, bearing in mind the 70s and 80s, hooliganism was known as the British disease. But he did mention that in the last 2 or 3 years that intolerance and racism has increased. So there has been an overall improvement, but it's kind of spiked up again in the last few years. So we can't be complacent about this. Every club needs to take this matter very seriously, and it must never ever be excused as banter. To me, it isn't just the racism; it's the fact that I've never understood how someone could get themselves so worked up that they would throw a missile, whether a lighter or a coin, at a stranger. Now, you may not like a player, you may be think that a decision has been unfair or whatever, but no referee or player should have to put up with that crap. And if you cannot control yourself, if you're so degenerate that you're going to throw missiles and hurl racist abuse at someone just because you don't like the fact that there's a decision that you don't agree with, or their team is winning or whatever, you need to take a good long look at yourself in the mirror. I really do think examples should be made of these people. I'm pleased this guy's been arrested, but I think there should have been more arrests. I think the people throwing coins or throwing lighters should have been arrested as well. Um, I mean, it's very clear that people on the front stands, if you look at the footage, They were hurling abuse. You could see the verbal abuse being hurled at the player. Um, I think any abuse is wrong, racist abuse in particular, but I think any abuse is wrong. And if you're such a knuckle dragging Neanderthal that you cannot have self control going to a sporting event, if you're such a loser that you're going to abuse a total stranger over the decision at a sporting event, then what does that say about you? What sort of person are you? What sort of shallow life are you leading that you feel the need to behave that way? I mean, there are more important things in this world than whether or not your team wins. Okay, if you think a decision's been made unfairly or whatever, then fine. There's fan associations where they can lobby on these sort of things. But it's the same in boxing. When boxing referees get a lot of stick because fans have think they've made a bad decision. But I always say in the case of boxing, it's better that a referee ends a fight early and maybe saves a young man's life potentially versus ending it too late. I mean, that's an incredibly difficult position to be in. I remember when I defended the referee Howard Foster. Um, I came across a comment recently. I didn't even humour it. The guy came out and said this was on the video I made about that. I haven't even watched the video, but just shut the f up to me. The truth of the matter is, and this gets into this whole toxic masculinity thing. There are guys out there, and it is 99% men, right? There's no point pretending this is a gender neutral issue. There are guys out there who have no self control. They go to sporting events, and I would say the two main. I mean, there's a lot of focus on football, but I think there should also be scrutiny of boxing. I do think there's a problem in boxing, maybe not so much with racism, but with just yobbish behaviour. It's absolutely disgusting that anyone would feel the need to treat an athlete in this way. I mean, okay, footballers get paid millions and they have very privileged lives, but that is not an excuse to treat someone that way, ever. So I think the tough language is justified. I'm pleased this guy has been made an example of. I personally think there should have been more arrests. It's better than nothing. At least it's been made an example of. I do support lifetime bans. If you're going to go to a match and behave like that, if you're not going to, act like a civilized human being, you don't deserve to be treated like one. You deserve to be given the contempt of a degenerate criminal. I really do believe that. Um, and it disgusts me that people dismiss it as banter. Now, to be fair, most football fans know this is a problem and they totally denounce it. But you could have, let's say, I mean, the capacity of that stadium, I believe, is 55,000. Let's say you have 54,000 people who are just there to watch the match and have a good time. You can have 1,000 people behaving like yobs. That is enough to create a sour atmosphere. And if you're a player and you're in the middle of that, it's like being in the Roman Colosseum when you have a mob baying for blood. It's a very, very ugly thing. And I've got nothing but contempt for the cards and they do it because of strength of numbers. You could be damn sure it's the sort of strength of numbers. Like, oh, I'm with the lads, I can behave whatever way I want. No, you can't, you degenerate scumbag. That's how I feel about it. People might think I'm being harsh, but my whole life I've had contempt for these sort of people. And yeah, the racism factor is a major aspect of it. But I think generally, even if it was abuse hurled at white players, it would also be wrong and also be ugly. Gary Neville has blamed Boris Johnson for it. I'm not sure what his angle for that is. I don't really buy that. I mean, ultimately, it's the Yobs themselves are 100% to blame. I've never seen Johnson. Okay, Johnson's come out with things that are definitely dubious, but I've never seen him condone that sort of racism. So I think that's a little bit of a excuse, or that's the wrong focus. The focus should be on the Yobs themselves. These aren't children; these are grown men, grown ass men behaving like animals. and they need to be absolutely harshly punished. I believe that because, for God's sake, we're getting into the third decade of the 21st century, and this sort of ugly mentality belongs in the 1930s. It's absolutely disgusting. So whether it be in football or whether it be in boxing, it needs to be purged. And as for Bulgaria and Russia and other countries that, I mean, in the case of Russia, and maybe I'm going off on a tangent here, but it isn't just an issue with football in England and Scotland. It's also an issue in other countries. And in other countries, you have senior Russian officials actually condoning hooliganism. The irony is, Russia actually has a law directed at hooliganism, which is often used basically as an excuse to crack down on political dissidents. Yet when it comes to actual hooligans, Russia is very soft. Russia takes a very lenient approach. And you see senior Russian officials make excuses. Latin America, this is a problem worldwide. Turkey. Turkey has a severe problem with it. So does Egypt. I remember a few years ago there was F's at a match in Egypt over this. So by no means is Britain the worst. I doubt we're even in the top ranking of when it comes to football yobbery. But we have responsibility for what happens on our soil, and it's right that the language is tough, and it's right that an example is being made of this guy. But I would like to see more examples being made. I would like to see more arrests. I think anyone throwing a missile at a player, there's absolutely, it goes without saying. And another thing, it's all very well having these campaigns say let's kick racism out, but it's kind of like telling rapists please don't rape. These sort of criminals, and that's how I consider them. There's no point trying to get them to see the light. They need to be punished. They need to feel the weight. As for this guy, you know, I have zero sympathy with him. No one should be targeting his family. They should keep his family out of it. But him personally, I hope he takes all the heat that comes in his direction. I really do. Because he went to a match, he thought he could abuse a player with a gesture that belongs in another era. Really. It's disgusting. Absolutely. I must admit, this really worked me up because I remember last year during the World Cup semi final when the Yobs went into IKEA, and that's when England was doing well. So if that's how they behave when England does well, how are they going to behave when England loses? Absolute degenerate scum. That's how I see them. And I think we need to stop being politically correct and calling them fans. Let's call them yobs. Let's call them hooligans. Let's call them racist, low-life, degenerate losers. That's what they are. So I do think examples should be made of them. I'd even support naming and shaming. A sort of scheme whereby clubs name and shame um, supporters who are found guilty of this. Now, I do emphasise found guilty. Of course, there needs to be evidence. Of course, they need to be clearly identified. But you don't want a situation where an innocent person is falsely accused of this behaviour. And when you have a big crowd, it needs to be clear cut. I do put that caveat. But where people are being clearly identified, they need to be punished. Absolutely. And not just a fine. They need to be punished. Uh, I'm not saying I wouldn't go for a jail sentence with chanting, but certainly if they're throwing missiles, I would say that would warrant a custodial sentence because that can cause serious damage. People have been blinded by missiles like that in the past. In Latin America, there was a referee killed when a missile was thrown onto the pitch. So this is not a trivial thing. And to those people, I have nothing but disgust for them because they hide behind a crowd, they hide behind a mob. And when you get a group of guys who are tanked up on booze and they have that sort of mindset, it's a very ugly, intimidating thing for those who are the target, and it's disgusting. So they need to be made an example of. We need to purge this. completely. I don't accept this excuse of, oh, well, it's always going to be there. I think it is possible to drive it out. I think it's possible to polarize these people, marginalize these people, push them out, purge them in football and in boxing.